Coming up on News Exchange Votes, debunking the mystery over fake fans and followers online. And after that, we speak to the Coalition Assistant Shadow Treasurer, Matthias Cormann, about PFO and the Coalition costings. Now, to our panel. Joining me to discuss the day's events, Labor MP Stephen Jones and Liberal MP Alan Tudge. Welcome to you both.
Good to
G'day,
be
Lyndal.
with you. G'day, Alan.
We will start with the budget update, and far from resolving the issue of who will release their costings and when, the economic figures have simply fuelled the back and forth.
The figures in this document confirm
the economic statement released by Minister Wong and I the Friday before last confirms those figures in relation to the economic outlook, jobs, growth, employment, inflation, and also in relation to the fiscal outlook. Now that the independent analysis of Australia's central economic agencies has been released to the public, it's time, as I say, for all parties to comply with the Charter of Budget Honesty, as the government has been doing. From this day forward, there is no excuse for the opposition not to release all its costings.
Given Labor's track record of being utter failures at predicting and confirming their future spending and their future budget commitments, their debt levels, all of the rest of it that we've seen, we've all become used to over the last 6 years. It's all there writ large in this Treasury statement today. Given that record, the community needs to know from Mr Rudd just when will they see his costings. And I just say to you, if you go and to the Treasury's election costings website and you click on Labor, what you'll see is a blank page.
Stephen, at every election there's an argument about policy costings. Both sides accuse the other of doing the wrong thing, either at election time or in the past. Is there any way this can actually be resolved so this is not a debate at every election time?
Yes, it was resolved, and it was resolved when the coalition in government introduced the legislation for the Charter of Budget Honesty, the same legislation that mandated the release of the pre-election fiscal outlook. The excuse that the coalition are now giving for dishonouring their own legislation, for refusing to produce costings of their policy, can only mean one thing, and that is that they are trying to hoodwink the Australian people. They are trying to creep into this election without any costing details of what it is that they are proposing to do, their policies or their plans, and the Australian people should not be required to put up with that.
Now, I've raised this on the program before today. When you were last in opposition, you put your policy costings out very close to election day, yet now you're in government, you complain about the opposition, that the opposition might do the same thing.
Yeah, we did put them out, Lyndal, exactly right. We did put them out before the election.
When did you put them out, Stephen?
Importantly, however, we have not seen a coalition government, a coalition party make such a meal of their costings and such a deal of the state of the budget as we have seen over the last 2.5 years, and make such grand promises about what they are going to do. Now, we know they've got some big costing initiatives. They cannot make their budget add up. There is a $70 billion black hole. We know this because both Joe Hockey and Andrew Robb have said that is the size of the task that they need to make. $70 billion worth of savings. Well, if they are going to make $70 billion worth of savings, they have to come clean with the Australian people and tell us how they're going to do it.
Alan, when the coalition was last in government, it complained about the time Labor put out its costings in opposition. Can you see a way to change this situation so this argument is not had at the next election and the one after that?
Well, we have always said that once the pre-election fiscal outlook was tabled, then we would start to release our collated costings and savings measures, and we will do that before the election as we have committed to do so. But let me pick up on a couple of things that Stephen said. Firstly, you are right, Lyndal, in terms of when Kevin Rudd was last a leader leading up to an election, he delivered his costings at 5 p.m. on the Friday before the Saturday election. So we're not going to take any lectures from the Labor Party in relation to this.
And the last election, you released yours only a couple of days before the election.
And let me say something about this constant misleading statement which Stephen continues to propagate about the $70 billion so-called black hole which we have. That is wrong, that is false, Stephen knows that, and even Fairfax's own political fact unit checking system has said that it is false. There is double counting of over $20 billion and there are assumptions which are incorrect.
We might move on now. Now, the Liberal MP John Randall has warned a coalition government might have to break some promises in government. The comments reported on the West Australian were eagerly picked up by the Prime Minister, while Tony Abbott publicly chastised his backbencher and said his government would honour its word.
I've noticed that a Liberal National Party frontbencher, Mr Randall, has been out there saying that if they're elected to government, they would consider reversing the pre-election promises that they are making. I've got to congratulate Mr Randall on belling the cat.
It will be pressure that I will resist. I will defy, because I want to be known as a politician, as a Prime Minister. Should I get elected, should I be elected on the 7th of September, I want to be known as a Prime Minister who keeps commitments.
Alan, given everything that Tony Abbott has made of accusing the government of breaking its promises, he cannot afford in government to break a single promise, can he?
And we won't be breaking promises, Lyndal. Don Randall was wrong. We will be keeping our commitments. We will be keeping and honouring our promises.
Every single one, even if circumstances change?
The only party that has broken fundamental promises has been the Labor Party. We know the carbon tax promise, which was broken. We know Kevin Rudd's promise for a surplus, that's been broken. Kevin Rudd promised to turn the boats around, that's been broken, and I could go on. Labor has broken promise after promise. We are determined to make commitments which we can reach, which we can implement, and which we can deliver for the Australian people if we are elected.
Stephen, we know from previous governments that have coming from opposition that you make promises in opposition. Sometimes circumstances change and you can't meet those promises. Do you think you should hold a coalition government to the standards it says it will set?
Well, I think we should hold the coalition government to the standard that they set themselves for themselves. For instance, and Alan has just denied the statement I've made. On the 16th of August 2011, Andrew Robb had this to say: "We are saying that we need to identify up to $70 billion over the next 4 years if we can." He had that to say, and then it was put to him again a couple of days later on Meet the Press.
You know
it's not a furphy then.
Untruth.
No, it's not a
furphy.
We came out with this figure.
Stephen,
so
and
this is the figure.
Hang on, I'll just tell you,
you,
gentlemen, if you talk over the top of each other, the viewers cannot hear what you are saying. Stephen, we have discussed the $70 billion figure already. How important is it in the voters' eyes for a government to keep the promises they make, particularly during an election campaign?
Well, I think it's important that if you're going into the election saying that you believe you can deliver something, that you show at least some proof. If you are going into an election with a series of promises, then you should at least be able to show that you are able to cost those promises. But we are going into this election in the extraordinary situation where you've got a coalition that wants to form government. They've got no policies, no costings, and a mouthful of nasty negative slogans. And I think the Australian people deserve a bit better than that.
Alan, you have an interest in education matters. Only a couple of days before the election, the coalition decided it would keep the government's education funding reforms for those jurisdictions that had signed up for 4 years. Only a little time before that, your side had called those promises unaffordable, called them political, and saying that the system wasn't broken. Are you effectively adopting policies you don't believe in?
No, what we've said is that we will honour the commitment, the funding commitments which the government has signed up to with the state governments and the Catholic and independent sectors. We said that because we know that schools need to set their budgets now for next year, and we wanted to give them certainty.
But you were saying, Christopher Pyne was saying before that a commitment to keep it for 1 year would give them the certainty.
Well, we've said that we will honour the commitments over 4 years now, and one of the reasons that we were concerned before, and this is indeed why some states still haven't signed up, was because there were so many conditions placed upon that government funding. And in essence, it wanted to be a Canberra takeover of the schools. Now, we don't run any schools. The state governments run the schools, the Catholic Education Commissions run the schools, and indeed the government backed down on those conditions. And that's why the state governments could sign up, and that's why the Catholic Education Commissions could sign up, and that's one of the reasons that we were prepared to also honour those funding commitments.
Stephen, if the funding model is in place for 4 years, does that mean if a coalition gets in, does that guarantee it a bit more longevity?
I think what we need is a guarantee well into the future. Can I say, when we were last together, Alan, you were bagging the Gonski reforms, and you'd said that they'd never happen, particularly in your state of Victoria.
And you completely changed.
And they have.
You completely changed them.
And here is the essence of it. Look, here is the essence of it. When you are providing $10 billion in additional funding to the states and territories and the systemic schools throughout the country, it's not unreasonable that you set some conditions, particularly around the quality and standards of education. That's what we are requiring of the states and the territories and the systemic schools, and I think most Australians think that's reasonable.
Now, we might end by having a look at Mr Abbott. He was campaigning in the seat of Lindsay, launching a campaign bus, and he was asked what the current coalition candidate has in common with the former Liberal member for the seat, Jackie Kelly.
They're young, they're feisty, I think I can probably say have a bit of sex appeal, and they're just very, very connected with the local area.
Now, I'll ask you, Alan, first, is sex appeal a new metric to judge a potential candidates by?
No, I think that was a light-hearted comment, and I think that Fiona, the candidate, took it in a light-hearted manner, and I understand she's made exactly that comment. People were laughing at the time, and I don't think it's that big a deal.
Stephen, I hesitate to say this, but any chance that that the male members and candidates for Parliament might be judged by their sex appeal?
Look, I really do hope not, because a lot of us will undoubtedly fail.
What about you, Stephen? You've got a big
Can I make this point? Can I just make this point though? When you've got no policies and you've got no costings, it's not surprising that you're scraping around like Tony Abbott was obviously scraping around today. But I'm not going to bag him for the particular comment that he made. I think offhanded comments can often get made in the course of, I think it was a bit off colour, but those sorts of things are made, and you wouldn't really want to nail somebody for it.
And on that note, Stephen Jones and Alan Tudge, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Lyndal. Thanks, Stephen.
And just a reminder, coming up after NX Votes, an interview with the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Matthias Cormann. But that is all for Capitol Hill for now. Now we go to Matt Cargill and NX Vote.